this is Samantha Martirez, and I'll be doing a presentation on the Cinderella adaptations. They're actually stories that follow the same storyline as Cinderella, and these are the versions that I would like to talk about. The first version is Yishin, second version is Ella Enchanted, and the third version is Cinder. The first version of Cinderella is the story of Yishin, which is the earliest version of Cinderella originated from China. It follows the story of the protagonist, Yeshin, who is an orphan and whose parents died from illness. She grew up in her stepmother's home, where she is forced to become a lowly servant because her stepmother is jealous of her beauty, of Yeshin's beauty, to be exact. Despite being treated badly, Yeshin finds solace in her magical pet fish that she had caught and raised. However, the stepmother eventually knew of this fish's presence and decided to kill the fish. It turns out that the bones of the fish are magical, and Yeshin uses it to ask for requests such as food and eventually going to the festival, where she will lose her golden slipper and meet her true love. The second version that I'm going to talk about is Ella Enchanted, which is written by Gail Carson Levine. This book was published in 1997 and centers around the plot in which Ella struggles with her curse as she is forced to obey every direct order. It starts when Ella was born and she was visited by Fairy Lucinda, who gives her the gift of obedience. As a result, she is forced to obey every direct order given to her. However, despite the curse, Ella is strong-willed and does not want to accept her fate. Although she encounters obstacles such as wicked step-families, ogres, and giants who are ready to take advantage of her curse, Ella is determined to break the curse in whatever means. The third version of Cinderella is a young adult novel called Cinder, which was written by Marissa Mayer. This novel is published in 2012, and it is the first book of the Lunar Chronicles, which is a series of books wherein each book has their own take on an old fairy tale. So, say Cinder, the first book, is based on Cinderella. The next book, which is Scarlet, is based on Red Riding Hood, and so on. So this book falls under the young adult genre, and it is set in a futuristic world where humans, cyborgs, and a race of moon colonists called Lunars exist. So in this book, Cinder, the protagonist, is a cyborg mechanic who works in a booth at a marketplace. In there, she meets her love interest, Prince Kai, who requests that Cinder to fix his personal android. As the story progresses, Cinder's stepsister, Peony, gets the plague that's been rampant on Earth. From there, Cinder is forcibly volunteered for cure testing by her stepmother, knowing well that Cinder may not survive the research for cure. This leads to Cinder finding more about herself in relation to her origins during her stay for cure testing. Meanwhile, tensions between Earth and Luna, which is a colony living in the moon where most citizens have special abilities, begin to rise, with Prince Kai and eventually Cinder caught in the middle of two worlds conflict. All three of these stories follow a certain formula of Cinderella. Their family lives, protagonists being servants, losing a shoe, or in Cinder's case, losing her foot since she's a cyborg, and many more. However, there are also differences among these versions. In this part of the presentation, we are going to analyze each of the versions' similarity and differences. First, we're going to talk about each version's family lives. In the three stories, all three protagonists grew up without parents. In the story of Yeshin, her parents died from sickness, and her father, who was chief, died from a local plague. In Ella Enchanted, Ella and her mom got sick, but Ella got well because of the unicorn hair that she ate from Mandy's soup. Meanwhile, her mom died because she refused to eat the unicorn hair that was given by Mandy, the cook. In Cinder, her mother, who used to be a queen in Luna, died from poisoning. It is stated that her mother's sister, Levana, was the one who poisoned her mom because of jealousy. To that, the protagonist grew up with step families who treated them abusively. Yeshin lives with a stepmother and stepsister who were jealous of her beauty. When their whole family was reduced to poverty, they made her a lowly servant and made her do ugly chores because of their jealousy. In Ella Enchanted, Ella was forced to go to finishing school with her stepsisters, who took full advantage of her curse. When she was forced to live with her stepmom and her stepsisters, they treated her as a servant as well. In Cinder lives with two stepsisters and her stepmom. One thing different about this was that Cinder actually got along with one of her stepsisters, Peony. Unfortunately, Peony died from the plague, which caused Cinder's mother to force Cinder to volunteer for a plague research, knowing well that there is only a slim chance that Cinder might get out alive. Second, I want to talk about their allies. Yeshen found solace in her magical pet fish, who she usually feeds every now and then. In Ella Enchanted, before she fell in love with Char, Ella became friends with him first. And lastly, Cinder had her android Eco, who helps Cinder around with mechanical stuff. Now, the last thing I want to focus on is the protagonist's characteristic. In the first version of Cinderella, Yeshin, she is seen as submissive, known for her beauty, and is very dependent on the bones of her pet fish. There is a quote that perfectly describes Yeshin, and here it is. Quote, "She was a bright child and lovely too, with skin smooth as ivory and dark pools for eyes. Her stepmother was jealous of all this beauty and goodness." So in this story, the story really never highlighted Yeshin's abilities as a person, but rather they emphasized on her beauty. Second, in the story of Ella Enchanted, the protagonist is very strong-willed despite the curse that made her obedient. Quote, "Instead of making me docile, Lucinda's curse made a rebel of me." And unquote. I think this quote perfectly describes Ella. Like, there are times where Ella, despite being given an order, she would try to resist it and see how long she could, it would take for her to actually do it. Lastly, in the story of Cinder is very strong-willed and sometimes stubborn. Similar to the original story, Cinder is always covered in dirt because of her job as a mechanic. It's just one thing cool to point out. And other two versions of Cinderella, both protagonists are described as beautiful. However, in this version of Cinderella, Cinder is looked down on because of her appearance as a cyborg. In the story of Cinder, cyborgs usually have are humans but with metal parts. So normally they're seen as robots at worst. So one quote that actually describes Cinder's appearance is not really described, but it's kind of implied. Quote, "Do your kind even know what love is? Can you feel anything at all, or is it just programmed?" This quote kind of implies it insults Cinder in a way that, like, they think she is not capable of feeling because she's a cyborg. But in reality, she's just human with metal parts. So that's how they look down on her.